then I've been tricked.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're exploring how Disney removed the more graphic and disturbing elements of the Grimm fairy tale Snow White. Granted, these changes resulted in a perennial animated classic, but the live-action remake would have stood out more with a hard R rating, don't you think?
Ooh, it's dark inside.
If you love games, be sure to check out WatchMojo's new game Terrible Influence, launching soon on Kickstarter. Terrible Influence is a satirical board game about the dark side of fame from the writer of The Most Popular Girls in School and us, WatchMojo.
Boom.
Dang.
I can make an apology video.
Oh, you so would.
Click on the link in the description to follow our Kickstarter campaign and be the first to play Terrible Influence.
I need to pay a PR wizard to make this go away.
Okay.
$4 million.
What did you do?
It was bad.
Number 10. Snow White's Mother. Snow White's mother is absent from the 1937 version and dies off screen in the remake.
And it may not be much, but when I was young, my parents...
The original fairy tale opens with the mother pricking her finger on a needle, causing 3 drops of blood to land in the snow. This inspires her to wish for a child as white as snow and as red as blood. The blood part is an odd request, and the fact that she specifically wants a white child leads us to believe this queen was an early champion of colonialism.
Soon after, a daughter was born to the queen and was named Snow White.
That's unsettling. In the earliest version, the queen becomes envious of her own daughter, plotting to murder her. The updated text isn't much better, revealing that Snow White's mother died in childbirth and her father remarried a vain woman.
This was my father's kingdom, a place of fairness. But the queen changed everything.
Number 9. Snow White's age. People are often surprised to learn that the animated Snow White is canonically only 14.
I don't understand.
If there's one change in the live-action remake we can get on board with, it's making Snow White a more acceptable age. To the 1937 film's credit, though, it also aged up Snow White. In the Grimm fairy tale, Snow White's fairness surpasses the Queen's at age 7.
Alas, she is more fair than thee.
It's never clarified if Snow White gets older throughout the story, so we're left to assume that the Queen not only plots to murder a little girl, but she's jealous of her physical beauty. It also means that Snow White gets married before even becoming a teenager. Suddenly, the Disney version being a young teen doesn't sound quite as iffy.
Oh, how silly of me. I'm Snow White.
Snow White, the princess?
Yes.
Number 8. A Cannibalistic Queen. In both Disney versions, the Queen requests that the huntsman bring Snow White's heart in a box as proof of her demise.
But to make doubly sure you do not fail, bring back her heart in this.
The animated film sees him come back with a pig's heart. In the live-action adaptation, he fills the box with an apple. In the Grimm fairy tale, the Queen demands Snow White's lungs and liver as evidence. That's about on par with asking for her heart, but the Grimm version adds one more detail. The Queen wants to eat Snow White's harvested body parts.
She is also your salvation queen. Take her heart in your hand, and you shall never again need to consume youth. You shall never again weaken or age.
The huntsman returns with a boar's lungs and liver, which the Queen proceeds to chow down on, under the impression that she's consuming the organs of a human being. At least she had the cook boil them with salt.
The blundering fool.
Number 7. The First Murder Attempt. Before presenting Snow White with a poisoned apple, the Queen makes multiple attempts on her life in the Grimm fairy tale.
All alone, my pet?
First, the Queen arrives at the dwarf's cottage disguised as an elderly merchant, offering her a bodice lace. Helping her put the article of clothing on, the Queen laces the princess so tightly that she can't breathe, passing out.
Oh, it is lovely. But it's a little tight.
You better to show off your figure.
But I can't breathe.
The Queen makes a getaway, but the dwarves return home shortly after. Cutting the lace in half, they manage to revive Snow White just in time. We guess Disney realized that watching Snow White almost suffocate to death would have been overkill. The important thing is that Snow White learned from this near-death experience that she should never talk to strangers, right?
She'll be back.
What will I do?
Don't be afraid. We will be here to protect you. But if we're not here...
You mustn't let anyone in.
Number 6. The Second Murder Attempt. When the lace doesn't pan out, the Queen returns to Snow White as a comb seller. She brushes Snow White's hair with a poisoned comb, causing her to fall into slumber.
I've seen that comb somewhere before.
But you never see it again.
Once again, the queen flees, but the dwarf saves Snow White at the last minute. The queen strikes back with a poisoned apple, proving that the third time's a charm. Although Snow White is hesitant at first, the queen ultimately tricks her into taking a bite.
Oh, I feel strange.
After the previous 2 attempts, you'd think Snow White would have wised up. At the very least, one of the dwarfs should have stayed home to provide adult supervision because, as we mentioned before, this Snow White isn't even old enough to create her own social media account.
The old queen's a sly one, full of witchcraft. So beware the strangers.
Don't worry. I'll be all right.
Number 5, the first meeting with the prince. The prince and Snow White only have one prior meeting before he revives her in the animated feature.
One song, I have but one song only for you.
Even in the remake, Snow White and her love interest only know each other a couple of days before the life-saving kiss. The romance escalates the fastest in the OG fairy tale, however. The prince doesn't encounter Snow White for the first time until she's seemingly dead and in the coffin. The prince immediately becomes obsessed, asking the dwarfs to sell him the coffin with Snow White in it. They refuse, but the prince says, "Then give it to me, for I cannot live without being able to see Snow White." We think this is supposed to be romantic, but the prince sounds like a serial killer.
Oh!
Hello.
Oh.
Did I frighten you? Wait, please. Don't run away.
Number 4, how Snow White is awakened. As if being infatuated with an unconscious body isn't troubling enough, the Grimm version of the prince has his servants carry the coffin wherever he goes.
I shall spend my entire life in mourning for her.
Eventually, one servant decides this is bull, striking Snow White on the back in a fit of rage and causing the apple chunk lodged in her throat to fall out. The brothers Grimm later updated this text, having the servant accidentally trip, inadvertently dislodging the apple from Snow White's gullet.
Princess!
We realize that some modern critics take issue with the whole true love's kiss thing, but you have to admit, it's more romantic, and less disgusting, than Snow White getting the Heimlich maneuver after having a stale piece of fruit stuck in her throat for days.
Where am I?
Arise, my beloved, and be my queen.
Number 3, a spontaneous marriage proposal. Many assume Snow White and her prince get married in the animated film. Technically, we never see their wedding, however. For all we know, they dated for an appropriate amount of time and then tied the knot. There's no room for ambiguity in the Grimm fairy tale. Right after Snow White is awakened, the prince says, "I love you more than anything else in the world. Come with me to my father's castle. You shall become my wife."
Father, this is Snow White, my bride-to-be.
Even though this is literally the first time Snow White has ever laid eyes on this strange man who's been carrying around her body, she knows he's the one, we suppose. And remember, she's still not old enough to even have a summer job in most states.
If there be anyone who would speak against this union, may he now speak or forever hold his peace.
Number 2, the Queen's downfall. The Queen gets her comeuppance in both Disney films, but the original version goes a little overboard.
There she goes!
The fairy tale ends with the Queen arriving at Snow White and the prince's wedding, realizing her stepdaughter isn't quite dead yet. The bride and groom aren't exactly in a forgiving mood.
You're wasting your time. You've already lost. But I will not let you ruin this wedding.
A pair of iron shoes are put on burning coal. The Queen is then forced to wear the red-hot shoes and dance until she dies. And they all lived happily ever after. Well, almost all. Talk about a grim ending in more ways than one. Yes, the Queen was evil. Yes, she deserved to be punished for her crimes, but at least the poisoned apple was a somewhat peaceful way to go. This is straight up sadistic.
Have a bite? It's not for you. It's for Snow White.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Number 1. So, our heroes are totally murderers, right? In the 1937 film, the dwarfs pursue the Queen up a mountain where she falls to her doom. The Queen is essentially responsible for her own demise in Disney's remake, too. In the Grimm version, Snow White and the Prince have blood on their hands. They go out of their way to ensure the Queen dies in the most excruciating way possible. The couple even makes a public spectacle of her death, as their guests can intently watch this woman dance herself into an early grave. Then, when she finally drops dead, the wedding presumably continues as planned. Time to throw the bouquet! You thought Game of Thrones had the darkest weddings in all of fantasy? The Red Wedding has nothing on the Queen's red shoes. Would you like to see Disney or another studio try to faithfully adapt the original Gory version of Snow White? Let us know in the comments. Oh, and just to reiterate before we go, Snow White is 7 years old! Thank you.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.